Good evening, viewers all over the world. This is Bridge Radio Africa, Ashford Garvey Live. Guess what? Tonight, Ashford Garvey, the giant, the brother who doesn't eat iron, who's stronger than a lion, Tokpasi J. It's not going to be in studios with me tonight, but welcome. This is Volcano Shelton. I'll be hosting the program tonight live here on our Facebook and YouTube channels simultaneously. So we want to welcome all of you, our viewers and listeners all over the world. Today we have a very interesting topic. We have a wonderful guest. Our guest actually is Miss Massa Washington. Massa Washington is a Liberian journalist and a women and human rights activist, and she served as one of the commissioners on the Liberia's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC. We will be discussing an array of issues, but the most important of those issues will be why up to now, Liberians who died between the period of 1979 to 2003 have not been memorialized in the country. So we want you to stay tuned and welcome to this edition of Ashford Garvey Live here on Bridge Radio Africa. So I know I'm feeling the big shoes tonight, the giant, but here comes the eruptible, and so I am grateful for the opportunity to be with you guys tonight. I hope you all, stay tuned. I can see folks are joining in. Abu Babeto Fofana, welcome to the show. Vivian Zobei, Mapla Nikia, Jack Mersch, Alvin Perry. All of you folks, welcome tonight. We're going to have a very wonderful show. Actually, the topic is sensational in nature, but is also benefiting to the Liberian people. Again, as I said, I have my guest, Massa Washington, so I would like to bring her in studio because we don't have all the time in the world. Massa, could you just come a little closer? There you go. Welcome to Bridge Radio Africa, Ashford Garvey Live here with Volcano Shelton, the co-host of the program. The giant is not here tonight, but you're in good company.
Thank you very much, Volcano. It's actually a pleasure being on your show.
Thank you so much also for honoring the invitation, on a short notice.
No problem.
So I know a lot of people out there don't know probably who Massa Washington is, and a lot of people know. So let's just balance the scorecard. Talk a little bit about yourself.
My name is Massa Emilia Washington. I'm a Liberian journalist by profession. I worked as a journalist in Liberia for many, many years. And I was very active during the war years. I reported from all factional territories and also from Monrovia, of course. I was based in Monrovia. I worked with the Inquirer newspaper at the time. At the time, the Inquirer newspaper was the #1 newspaper in Liberia. And I worked as a reporter and later on as news editor. And I cover a lot of stories. I actually broke the news for the Carter Camp massacre. I was the first journalist on the scene of the Carter Camp massacre. I went along with photojournalist at the time, James Mumble. Both of us broke the story of the Carter Camp massacre. In fact, on the anniversary of the Carter Camp massacre last year, I did a piece on it and about what we discovered when we got to Carter Camp. I was also a first responder at the Lutheran Church massacre in Sinker. I happened to have been a Red Cross volunteer, and as a Red Cross volunteer and also a journalist, when everything shut down in Liberia, in the city of Monrovia, when offices were shut down, schools were shut down, people couldn't go and do their regular day-to-day activities because of the war. And so I went back. I was always a Red Cross volunteer. I joined the Red Cross when I was 16 years old. And so when I couldn't work freely, go to office and go to school, I went back to the Red Cross and volunteer my services to work with internally displaced people. At that time, Liberians were running from the war, and there was a huge influx of people from place to place, a migration of people all over the place. So I was one of those volunteers who was shuttling in between the Lutheran Church and also the J.J. Roberts Elementary School on 12th Street. And we used to take turns spending some time at the Lutheran Church to work with the internally displaced people there. And then one week we will be at the Lutheran Church, and then the other week we will be assigned at the J.J. Roberts School. So luckily for me, when the Lutheran Church massacre took place that day, I had just finished working there that week, and I was assigned at the J.J. Roberts school compound. And that night we could hear shooting, we could hear stuff, and those of us, the staff at the J.J. Roberts School, we actually thought that the rebels had overran ERWA, and we thought the rebels had overran ERWA and were in the Sinker area. And so what we did was we couldn't sleep that night, so we just stood up, the male and female staff, we just stood in round circle holding hands and praying to God. And we had, we said that we were going to die that night because we felt that it was the rebels had finished overrunning the place. Here we were in the displaced center with more than 200 displaced persons who were at the displaced center of men, women, and children. And so we kind of figured that we were trapped. And so we just stayed up all night holding hands in circle and just praying. We said, if we die praying. And around 6 o'clock that morning, because, the curfew was from 6 to 6, around 6 o'clock that morning, we just heard noise. People were yelling, running all over the place. And we went outside of the J.J. Roberts School compound to see what was going on. And then people were telling us, they have killed so many people at Lutheran Church. So we just ran, typical Red Crossers. We were all trained Red Crossers. So we ran into our supply room, put on our apron, put on gloves, and grabbed stretchers and stuff. And we just went running up the street to 14th Street. It was only 2 streets different. We were on 12th Street, and the Lutheran Church massacre happened on 14th Street. So we just ran up there. And when we got there, oh my God, it was quite a scene. Again, we were the first group of people to arrive, the first group of civilians to arrive. When we got there, there were remnants of some soldiers standing across from the Lutheran Church, not on the boulevard side, but on the side. Were standing up there. There was just a handful of them that were standing up. And as we got there, they started taunting us. They were insulting us. They were threatening us, telling us, you're Red Cross people. You think we don't know that you're harboring rebels? You think we don't know that you're supporting the rebels? We will kill you. You will be next in all of that. We just ignored them. And we tried to work with those who were not dead. A lot of people dead. And we told ourselves, don't touch the dead people. Just look for those who are still alive and see if you can provide them some kind of help, CPR, first aid, or whatsoever.
So that was your that was your second experience?
No, that was my first experience.
First, then Carter Camp, then
the Lutheran Church massacre actually happened July that year when Dyer was still in power.
It was 1990.
Yeah, it was 1990. Dyer was still president, but he was being besieged because the rebels had the entire country, and Monrovia was really surrounded. And so the Lutheran Church massacre was actually the first massacre that I covered. I was, as a first responder. And then later on, when ECOMOG was in Liberia, and during the administration of the interim government of national unity of Dr. Amos Sawyer, it was when the Carter Camp massacre took place. And, newspapers were operating and stuff. And then so I ran up there to cover the story. But it has been quite a joining with people like us being born in Liberia. We stayed there through all the conflict eras. We saw the violence. We saw the antecedents to the violence. And we saw some of the conflict mapping issues, some of the issues that precipitated the violence. And then we saw the actual violence. We've lost relatives. We lost one of my brothers, was killed, chopped into pieces by Ulimo rebels. He was actually my stepbrother, but he grew up with us. We were very close. He was a handicap. I was in charge of him. He was deaf and dumb, and he was killed. And I have uncles, and so all of us lost people.
Yeah, absolutely, all of us.
Yeah,
and
right.
so fast forward, you now, end up becoming a commissioner. But prior to becoming a commissioner, you were opportune to go to Rwanda, where you saw firsthand. Just give us a minute or two to tell us exactly what happened. What was your experience in Rwanda?
So, because at that time, I was working very intensely as a journalist. You were there at that time. All of us are, you were a radio journalist. I was a newspaper journalist. And, we were all reporting the news, trying to get the news to our people.
Yeah.
And those days, I'm not saying that journalists these days, they don't work with their heart. They do their best based upon, what materials and stuff they have. But those days, we reported hard news, the hard facts, because some real stuff was going on. And based upon my reporting all over the place, I was invited because Rwanda had been through the crisis. At the time when the Liberian Civil War started, the Rwanda genocide also started basically concomitantly almost around the same time. But unfortunately for us, when the Rwanda genocide has stopped, because it was 90 days, when it has stopped, and when the country was trying to get back to reconstruction and unity and stuff like that, Liberia was still in the throes of her own civil war. And so I was invited to Rwanda. I think it was 1998, because Taylor had become president then. He had won the elections, and he was in Monrovia. And I was invited to be part of a workshop they were restructuring the press code, the media. And Liberia was being used as a model, because with all that happened in Liberia, our press corps basically stuck together. So even though we had journalists who were cut, into different factional territories, we had some journalists who were in Taylor's territory, some were in Prince Johnson territory, some were in Monrovia, some were in territories, of other warring factions. But basically, journalists held the fort. We basically stuck to the journalistic principle of telling the truth. And journalists, we were friends, because when I used to go to Banga to report, some of my sources were actually journalists. They gave me some very good tips. They tried to help me in terms of security, make sure I was safe and stuff like that. So Liberian journalists internationally was being recognized for being able to, remain as a unit, basically, even though the war had happened. The press was still working, and we were still reporting. Whether you were in Taylor's territory or whatever, we were still bringing the news. And so when I went to Rwanda, as part of that workshop, I was one of the facilitators. I was given a tour of Rwanda, not only Kigali. Kigali is the capital city. And I toured a lot of places where the genocide took place. I toured the church where they had massacred so many people. I toured outside of Kigali on a boarding school where a lot of school children, they were in school on a mission when the massacre happened, was taking place, and they just went there and chopped them up into pieces. And then I also visited the memorial that they have there. They have a very organized and very decent memorial. It's a memorial of skulls. So when you enter, it's like a pyramid. The skulls, designed and shaped like a pyramid. You enter and you just see these skulls upon skulls upon skulls. And then on the other side, you can see different parts of the humans, like bones and, the feet, rib bones and all sorts of different bones. And then they have a general area where they have pictures of a lot of the victims. Now, whether those human remains, and those skeleton remains were actually the remains of those victims whose picture they have, or we really don't know. But the thing is, they did have a lot of pictures. They do have a lot of pictures of some of the victims they had. So, they have a very good memorial project. And then also what they did was they did memorials in different parts of Rwanda where the genocide took place and where the genocide was prevalent. I also had the opportunity to tour the prison. Now, toward the prison, I can tell you the prison was overcrowded with genocide perpetrators. At the toward the prison, some of the prisoners had come out in the courtyard to get some fresh air and to get sun, and they were sitting out in the courtyard. There were hundreds of them. The prison was packed to capacity, and Rwanda did not mince its self when it came to holding people accountable.
Yeah, justice, bringing justice.
Exactly. Those who bore the greatest responsibility, the Arusha Code in Tanzania, where the war crimes code for Rwanda took place. The war crimes code for Rwanda didn't take place in the Rwanda or Kigali. It took place in the Arusha, Tanzania, because Rwanda at the time didn't have the infrastructure and they didn't have the facilities and stuff to be able to host the war crimes code. So it was done in Arusha, Tanzania. But then also domestically, they had the domestic trial for some of those other people of, not lesser crimes per se, but, those who were caught under the domestic or human rights violations and stuff. And so, yeah, I toured the prison and I saw a lot. And I worked with the media. I made some friends with the media colleagues, and we discussed, we exchanged notes on, as journalists, on what we saw happen in Liberia, and then also what they saw happen in Rwanda.
In Rwanda.
Very interesting, even though it may sound a little bit trivial. But when I came back to Liberia, I gave an interview on it. In Rwanda, unfortunately, it was just human beings. It was just people they chop up with machetes, with cutlasses and stuff. They kill all those people. But guess what? They did not touch the infrastructures. They did not touch the basic services. When I went there, the lights were still on running. The water was still running. Nobody destroyed the hydro dam. Nobody destroyed the electric, compound. They didn't put houses on fire. They didn't burn houses. They didn't go into people's houses and root up the camels and So they didn't have that kind of massive destruction that Liberia experienced. In Liberia, we killed all those people, but then also destroyed all of the infrastructure. This is why it has been very difficult. The restructuring and the development of Liberia has been extremely difficult because everything was destroyed. All structures were destroyed. All systems were broken down. In addition to the massive human toll and also the human suffering.
Okay, so let's come now to Liberia. You've drawn your experience from Rwanda, and your credibility placed you on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Let's start first. How was the commission funded? What was the selection process? How did you get selected?
Okay, it's just it's like asking me to tell you everything about the TRC process. Is such a huge process. It's a lot of work was put into it.
I know. Just tell me. Oh, I got a call. I got selected. Were funded in part by
the TRC commissioners were vetted on the basis of public vetting.
Okay.
United Nations agencies and also international organizations and embassies like the United States Embassy play a very key role in all aspects of the commission work. So it was basically internationally accepted and supported, and they help with the structuring of it in terms of technical support, and also they supported financially, they supported programming. But because it was a Liberian process, they wanted it to be more like Liberian in nature. So the Liberian government funded the secretariat, meaning that the Liberian government was responsible to pay the salaries of commissioners and staff. And but experts who came, like the 3 international attack people, who one was representing the UN, one was representing ECOWAS and stuff, they were actually paid by the internationals, by UNDP. And so the government of Liberia took care of the secretariat, and the international communities, the different members of the international community took care of programming, meaning that They pay for statement taking. They pay for the investigations around the country. They pay for the hearings. We had two kinds of hearings. We had public hearings and we had in-camera hearings, which is actually private hearing, because there were some victims who did not want to come public with their testimony. It's the right. All TRC processes, you have two forms of hearing. It is the right of the victims. Not only the victims, but anybody who is coming before the TRC has the right to choose which form of hearings they want to participate in, especially the victims. TRCs are more victim-oriented because it is a time for the victims to have their voices heard, because they were the ones who were victimized and they were the ones whose voices were shut, closed. And so when the victims tells us that, hey, I would love to come to the TRC to testify, but I want to do this privately, we have to honor that. So we had two sets of hearing, public hearing and private hearing. You were there when the public hearings were going on, and it was quite a spectacle. We had a wide range of people who came. We had people of interest. We actually had perpetrators who came. We had, former child soldiers who came. We had women. We had politicians. We had members of civil society. So the hearings, in fact, the entire TRC process touched on all facets of our society, because it was meant for the entire Liberia. It wasn't meant for just one group of people. So everybody, a lot of the warlords came. Mr. Bode testified, Dr. George Bode testified, Prince Johnson testified, even Dr. Amos Sawyer, they testified from the progressive end, because we also went into that era. And Sekou Demate Kone came and testified. And a lot of people testified.
All right. So here we are gathering all this data and information. It took, I believe, almost 5 years for this whole process? Three to 5 years?
Yes, it was 3 years, and then later on we got an extension.
Okay.
Let's say 5 years altogether.
Okay. All right. So all this data you gather, all these interviews, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of interviews, thousands of, very concrete stories to tell. Here we are today, 15 years later, and it seems as though nothing has happened, not even memorializing the victims. There is no shrine in Liberia. There is nothing in the archive except the documentation that you guys put together. I believe it was 400 pages or a little more than that. And that's a lot of work. That's a serious volume. And nothing has been done. What do you think is responsible for all of this? Nothing has been done. No one seems to care, from Ellen's government to now Mr. Weir.
I think what has happened is, and I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who was in Liberia long before the war. I had never left Liberia except for maybe traveling to go for conferences or whatsoever. So I was there from forever, from 1979. I was there during all of the conflict, periods. And then I worked as a journalist extensively. I also worked in women advocacy. We were advocating for an end to the war, and also women's participation in the peace process. And then I served on the TRC. And then I came back to civil society. And from my experience, what I think has happened here is that Liberians got it wrong in terms of how the approach that we took towards moving our country forward from wartime to at least finding peace and also finding healing and working together and trying to unite the country. For example, in Sierra Leone, just right next door, and I also happen to have gone to Sierra Leone several times. After the conflict, I went there several times. We saw how Sierra Leone came from that horrible civil war where they were hacking off people's hands to the model of peace that it is today and development. Sierra Leone is so far ahead of us because you know what? They got it right from the beginning. Sierra Leone did not try to appease everybody. Sierra Leone did not develop a system of let bygone be. Because when you have the kind of gross human rights violations that took place in Liberia, You got to institute different layers and different levels of addressing what has happened in the country. So you cannot have a situation where you have nearly 300,000 people died, and then people want it to be let bygones be. People don't want to discuss what happened. They just want it to go away. It's because they think that if they discuss what happened in the country, if they discuss the war and discuss the violence, then those who committed the violence, they think they will be brought back to the centerfold, and they would be noticed, and they would be made shame. But Sierra Leone, what Sierra Leone did from the very beginning was Sierra Leone brought the TRC and the War Crimes Court. So immediately following the TRC process, in fact, while the TRC process was going on, when the TRC recommended whatever recommendations the TRC made, the Sierra Leone people implemented it immediately, because you know what? The Sierra Leone people after the war did not vote for any warlord or any person who played a major role in the carnage. Okay? Even Inca Norman was the head of the Commodore, and the Commodore was considered the lesser of the evils of the rebel, because Fode Sanko had a RUF rebel, and the Commodore was, you would say, maybe the equivalent of our Black Beret. The Commodores were supposed to be a counter force, was created to be a counter force to the RUF of Fode Sanko. So they were supposed to be fighting against the RUF.
Similarly, like the Black Beret of the interim government that fought alongside the ECOMOG peacekeeping force during the 1992 Autopause invasion. Exactly,
yeah. But so even the Commodore, you know, when you fight war is not a clean thing. So no. Some of the soldiers did commit some atrocities, and some of them did, because, you know, the element of tribal element of people taking revenge. So when Sierra Leone started doing the post-conflict addressing what had happened in the country, they went all the way. They didn't vote for any warlord. They didn't vote for anybody who took part or who was a major player in the destruction of the country and who killed people. They didn't vote for people who were known economic criminals, that is, people who were stealing all the resources while other people were dying and they made themselves rich. They didn't vote for any of those people. I remember when the Sierra Leonean election was going on, I was a journalist in the news when we monitor it very closely. And the news were reporting, BBC and other international news were reporting that people, especially people up country, where they still had remnants of rebels and stuff, people were their hands were being hacked off because they were going to vote. But they still went and they voted anyway. And they insisted that they were not going to put any warlord in office. Politicians who they thought helped to create the problem and cause the problem, they didn't vote for them. So they gave themselves a clean break. And then after the TRC, in fact, they had the War Crimes Code and the TRC process almost simultaneously. So from the TRC, you went straight to the War Crimes Code if your name came up and if you were recommended for prosecution. Okay, so after the TRC, the recommendations were implemented. People went to jail. Fode Sanko died in jail. Inca Norman died in jail. Fode Sanko was the head of the RUF rebel, very vicious rebel force. Inca Norman should have been, his commanders were the moderate, you know, people fighting the rebels and stuff. But hey, they did some stuff. Inca Norman died in jail. And those who bore the greatest responsibility for the carnage in Sierra Leone were all arrested in jail. Some of them are still in jail today. So what Sierra Leone did basically
is a complete contrast to Liberia.
Exactly, it's a complete contrast to Liberia. So what is giving Liberia a hard time is that the people, okay, you have about maybe three group of people. One, the people who incited the war. There are some politicians, you know, they are white-collar rebels. They incited the war. They created the conditions for the war. And then those who actually sat down in America, organized the war, and then took the war to Liberia, and those who actually implemented the war, like the generals and stuff at the battlefront, those boys at the checkpoints who had human skulls on sticks. I was made to saddle human skulls and order, you know, and stuff like that. So you have all this category of people who were never held accountable, okay? Every time Liberians went to peace conferences, they allowed, you know, politicians play games. Everybody was only concerned about the next job, what job they would get and stuff. And they overlook the bigger picture. At the end of the day, guess what? Liberians came back from those peace conferences, and who were the leaders leading Liberia, the perpetrators and some major perpetrators. Like, for example, you had George Dwyer. George Dwyer was Speaker of the House of Legislature of Liberia.
Yeah, the TLA.
Exactly, and everybody knew George Dwyer was a notorious or perpetrator. He was a mass murderer. George Dwyer was the one who massacred Johnny Nam and his 8 months pregnant wife Fameta, opened her stomach and chopped the baby up. Killed 12-year-old daughter Hillary, and was shooting his son, but he jumped in a swamp and fled. And he was the only one who survived from our whole family. George,
did he testify?
Yeah, George Dwyer came to the TRC and testified.
Oh, I'm talking about the son of Johnny Nah. Did he testify?
Yeah. He did testify. In fact, before we even had the TRC process, I interviewed the son of Johnny Nah. After that happened, we were able to get him and we interviewed him. I interviewed him. I was one of the journalists at the Inquirer who interviewed Johnny Nah Jr. He showed us the bullet mark on his foot. Okay. And so I was already familiar with some of these things. So that's why on the TRC, it was easy for me to understand the issues because I already knew a lot based upon my public experience and exposure as a journalist, reporting everywhere, and also a women's rights advocate. So to make it short, the problem with Liberia here is that we did not do it right from the beginning. We played games. We were lukewarm about our
own. I guess we're still playing games.
We're still playing games. So all the people who created the crisis, the people who actually perpetrated the crisis and who perpetrated the violence, they are all our leaders. And it's been happening for the past 15 years. They're fading away a little bit, but we still have a lot of them still there. They're clinging onto power, they're holding onto power because they're holding on for dear life because they know that if they didn't have that political power, through the political power, they have amassed wealth as well, economic wealth. So they know if they didn't have that political power, and if they didn't have the economic wealth, it's going to be, a meal time for them. They're going to get milk, like the Americans here will say. So Liberians vote and they support the people who are perpetrated crimes against them. And it works in the favor of unscrupulous politicians. It's worked in the favor of warlords. It's worked in the favor of people who have committed gross violations of human rights because they can hide behind the public offices, the big jobs, and they can hide behind the stolen wealth and maintain a hold on the country. This is what is happening now with Liberia.
So if you just joining us, this is Ashford Garvey live here on British Radio Africa. We're coming your way via YouTube and Facebook, our both platforms, mediums through which our platform come to you. We're discussing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Liberia. We have one of the commissioners who served over those years of gathering data information, Ms. Massa Washington. She is a Liberian journalist and a women and human rights activist. So a lot of people have been wondering, they say you are so intelligent. Who is this woman? So apparently they didn't know who Massa Washington is. So Massa Washington is our studio guest tonight. Our boss, the CEO, Mr. Ashford Garvey, is not in tonight because he's taking care of some very pertinent business regarding our platform. So we want to welcome all of you. Massa, you talked about how humongous this process was. So it means we don't even have the time to talk about just an infinitesimal portion of the whole thing. But let's take on some of the greater pieces. 1990 to 2003, there is a generation that was born in that time. Fast forward to 2020, 2021 now. That's bulk of your voting population.
Absolutely.
Next election. And one of the things I've said over and over is that if we continue to take this these recommendations from the TRC and put it under the bed, put it under the carpet, and nothing is done with those recommendations, these young people will have no clue who these people were, especially those perpetrators, the ones who are in government now, shamming and bluffing and getting. They will continue to vote for these people. So what are some of the key ingredients within the recommendation that you think we can talk about here? Let's just say if we took 5, because for 47 recommendations, but one of them, before you even pick yours, one of them is barring these people from public office, from elected office for what? 30 years, right? Was it 30 years?
30 years, yeah.
30 years, because I think I read a portion of it. So
Mhm.
nothing has been done. So these same people continue to recycle. How did you guys drive, to that point to decide that give them 30 years that they cannot function, participate, or do anything in the governing process of Liberia?
Okay, so basically our decisions um, concerning the entire determinations and recommendations of the TRC was actually based on a process. It was an extensive process. We had a statement taking, we had extensive, intense investigation. We had so many different programs. We had workshops, we had town hall meetings, we had focus groups. We had, I stated before, we had hearings, in-camera hearings, and also we had public hearings. And so based upon the expansiveness of the process and what came to us, what we saw, that's how we were able to make our decisions. So commissioners didn't just sit individually and say, you know what, oh, we know it all. We were in Liberia, all of us were there, we survived the war. And so, we unilaterally have the solutions and the answers to what has happened in Liberia. No, we did not. Our decisions were influenced by our process. But most importantly, we were guided by the act establishing the Truth and Reconciliation of Liberia. The TRC is a legitimate legal body, okay, formed through an act of the national legislature, okay, and the act was passed and the bill was printed into handbill by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this is how the TRC Act looks like. This is TRC Act. This is how it looks like. Okay? And so we use this as our Bible. If this was our constitution, this was our guide as to what we should do. Here it told us what we were supposed to be doing, and sometimes it gave us some ideas as to how to go about it. The rest of it was dependent upon our process and then also what came to us from the field from Liberians. So it wasn't anything that we just sat down and decided to be smart and take, decision based upon how we felt or what we thought. Now, the decision banned people from public office for 30 years fell under the category of lustration. The sanction list, we call it the sanction list, but it's a form of lustration, meaning that these people we put on the sanction list, even though based upon our process, what came to us, the statement taking, the hearings, and the investigation, because there were some things that the TRC received that didn't come out in the public. Like I told you, there were in-camera hearings. And there was also other human rights documents that we received, like the Catholic Justice and Peace Commission of the Catholic Church. The JPC had their own human rights program going on during the war for years and years, long before the TRC came to being. So the JPC passed on copies of its archives to us. They were mapping out conflict, and they were also archiving what has happened in Liberia. The international community, like the Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, U.S. Embassy, all these different people provided documentations on what has happened in Liberia. Some of those documentations were historical documents. Some of them were contemporary documents that talk about what happened in Liberia. So besides the public hearings and the statement takings and investigation, we had all these other documents that came in that we went through. And some of them name certain individuals over and over. Some of them, certain individuals kept coming up. And even during the hearings, whether it was confidential hearings or public hearings, certain individuals were just so prolific. They were just that, their name were ranking like the ordinary Liberian man would say. In the role they played in the destruction of Liberia. There were some people also who even though they did a lot, but it didn't constitute, war crime. It didn't meet the standards and requirement for war crimes and for prosecution. So we didn't put them on the prosecution listing. Like I will tell you, for example, the former president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, her name is on the sanction list. And a lot of people came, they testified. There were a couple of NPF insiders who came publicly and said that she used to be behind the lines with Charles Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a journalist who was embedded with the NPFL those days when the NPFL was still out there in the forest in Butu and other places when it had not come to the city. This journalist said he was there when Ellen wore military uniform and was crossed over from the Ivory Coast into Greater Liberia, Butu or whatsoever to meet with Charles Taylor for them to discuss, war strategy and operation. And
Yes.
there were people who came and testified and said Ellen's name during the war, her war name was General Sirleaf. So now, to be named General Sirleaf, it means that you must have been a very important person.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this rebel group. Okay. And so we got all this information and we look at, we say, you know what? This woman is president. She's loved by the international community. She's a smart person. She our old man and everything. But hey, listen, we can't just not mention her because she got all these other qualities that people like. And even though she's president, say, listen, if we can be brave enough and fair enough to mention Ellen anywhere in this report, then we might as well don't write a report. So
right.
Who are we going to put in a report? The child soldiers who were deceived and given drugs, okay? Other ordinary people who were whipped up into a frenzy and killed their own people. So that's how people like Ellen and the rest of them found themselves on the sanction list. Now, the sanction list speaks to the political culpability of these individuals because the TRC Act says we can recommend, it was clear, it says we can recommend prosecution, we can recommend amnesty, we can subpoena people, we can storm any office to get any document that we need to influence our work. But then it's also say we can recommend and hold people who are politically responsible for what has happened. And so the sanction list is that political list. So people on the sanction list, some of them, we didn't have anything to say, well, nobody came, some of them to say, well, Ellen Johnson gave me a gun and said, shoot this person.
Okay.
Her role was so profound.
Okay.
That we just could not,
leave her out.
Report. And even everywhere we went while working on the TRC, everywhere we went engaged in the community, people would ask us. And the Liberian people, sometimes you think they don't know, but they know. People were asking us, commissioners, we will see how you will do this work. We will see if y'all will be fair. Because the president was involved in a whole lot of stuff. We will see how you will do this. And what sticks to my mind, I will never forget. I had oversight for Babolu County. And I used to go to Babolu a lot. I did a lot of work. I had oversight for Babolu, Cape Mount, and Bomi County. And I did a lot of work in those areas. And I remember at one of my workshops with the women of Babolu County, when we discussed, because what we did, the way we derived at the recommendations was based upon recommendations that Liberians told us in the field. So we came back and got those recommendations and we just looked for the ones that were most popular, the most popular ones, the ones that keep recurring. Mm-hmm. I remember at that workshop in Babolu County, the women, when we discussed what has happened to women in the war, and we discussed what they want to see in terms of accountability, reconciliation, reparation, development, all of that. You know what the women said? The women said, we want to see Ellen Johnson Sirleaf persecuted. It stunned me because, I didn't think that some of them really knew the issue at that level. Way up there, in Babolu. The women said, we want to see Ellen Johnson Sirleaf persecuted because she was involved in all of this. She was part of this. Everywhere we went, people were asking us about the president. Don't forget, because she was the president too, so she was a big name and she was very famous. And so people, remember they were talking her own thing. Certain people were very, popular in terms of the name, like Prince Johnson. People were asking us all the time, what y'all going to do about Prince Johnson? What y'all going to do about Alhaji Kroman? and all those kinds of things. So that's how you see the president name got on the sanction list. So the sanction list, how did we come about with the 30 years? We look at what we did was we look at the most recent contemporary origin of recent conflict and from 1979. We look at old individual players and stuff. And when you look at issues from 1979 all the way to the war, Ellie named ringing.
Ringing.
Ringing in everything. Oh, my name is ringing.
She's just the ringleader.
Exactly. So that's how we look at it. It was one commissioner who was creative, look at it and say, but you know what? These people been destroying this country contemporarily since 1979, and all of that. So we calculated from 1979 all the way to the time of the TRC process, it was 30 years. We say, okay, you know what? We ban them for another 30 years. They have done enough now. They shouldn't have any more opportunity to continue the destruction of Liberia. And we said, since Ellen is already president, and she was, president, doing her whatever she was doing her best whatsoever, we were not asking for her to be immediately removed from office. We said, no, finish your first term. We said she should be allowed to finish her first term, but she should not run for public office again. And of all the blackbuster recommendations that the TRC made, it was that sanction list, okay? Not even the prosecution list, because Ellen was not on the whole TRC recommendations got stuck in the mud because of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Because Ellen name was on the sanction list, so she made sure that the entire recommendations were not implemented. Even soft recommendations that I would consider soft, like for example, memorialization, where you will go to communities that have massacres, because the TRC identified more than 200 massacre sites, more than 600 actually massacre sites all over the 15 counties. So I think that those kinds of recommendations that would tend to unite the community and people and unite the government with the people, because if the government goes there and work with the local people to memorialize their dead ones, to honor the people who died foolishly in the wars by putting up memorial and putting all the names on the memorial and stuff, it helps to bring the government and the community closer, okay? And then we have recommendation for like reparation, because we know that Liberia didn't have the resources coming out of, that kind of devastating war. We know that she didn't have the financial resources. So the kind of recommendations for reparation that we focus on more was community-based reparation. For example, we say if there are areas in the country, like, a country where you don't have high schools, but then you have the population, they should go and put high school there. It's a form of reparation so that the children can have access to
education.
And for example, there were several places we went, people didn't have safe drinking water. Some people used to, the same creek that they were used to take bath, wash their clothes, it was the same creek water they were using, to drink. This is why children were getting sick all the time. Children were dying from simple things like diarrhea. Diarrhea had been eradicated by the World Health Organization before the war. All those diseases came back full blown, okay, because of the intense unsanitary situation. So those were some of the reparation we recommended. We recommended rehabilitation for child soldiers. We recommended opportunities for market women, small market loans and stuff like that. We recommended a road network, farm to market road. So those were the kind of community-based reparation we were looking at to help to heal the communities, to help to create jobs for the communities, and to help to unite the community and also unite the government with the community. So all those decent recommendations were sat on because Eddie Johnson Sirleaf's name was on the sanction list.
Let me come in quick. Very good background. Very, very good background. And honestly, I've always thought about it that we cannot come to reconcile that country if we do not memorialize almost 300,000 people who died. It comes across as though those people died in vain. And I've always had this on my mind. And that is why I'm so grateful tonight that you are our studio guest, because honestly, you were right there in the whole process. And the story you're giving here tonight is very factual because it's all in a report. And unfortunately, this report has gone nowhere. Now, when you guys made the recommendations, was the recommendation supposed to go through a legal process, like maybe through the House of Representatives, the Senate, before going to the Temple of Justice for implementation? What would have been the process? Rather than Ellen taking it and grabbing it and ripping it up and throwing it away because her name was on the uh, in the document.
Okay, so Ellen and the rest of them, Ellen and some people, her government, they had the team in the government just to squash the TRC report. Not only the TRC process, but they even came after the credibility, integrity of commissioners. Every day publishing some of us in every day you go to work, people say, oh, Massa, the guy in the newspaper, people were creating stories about commissioners that were not true, trying to malign us, trying to destroy our credibility, because the thing was, you know what, if we can destroy the credibility of the commissioners who created the report, then we have destroyed the report, because if the people who did the report are not credible, if they lack credibility, then, what's about the work that they produce?
Yeah.
So that was the strategy. So we went through a lot. The government was after us, trying to destroy our credibility. The perpetrators were threatening us every single day. I was on the boulevard one night going home, like around 7 o'clock in the night, Oral Junction, and where they used to have a Bernard gas station. And a white pickup truck was pushing me off the road. At first, it was stealing me. It had no license plate, nothing. It was just a white small pickup truck with two cabin. And as I'm driving, and my cousin is in the car with me, he said, Mil, I'm coming from work, so I'm driving myself. And when I got in that area, I noticed that this pickup was just following me.
And closely too.
Yeah. So I decided to accelerate a little bit. As I accelerated, it picked up speed. I slowed down, it slowed down. And then I said to him, that guy is stealing us. And then he looked at, he said, oh my God, it has no license plate, nothing. I said, you know what? Then he said, Commissioner, what are you going to do? I said, there's nothing I can do. I mean, so when I accelerated, he accelerated and he tried to like run me off the road. And so I quickly got off the road and I parked, off the road onto the gravel road. I parked and I immediately got out of the car. And I said, if anybody's going to kill me, everybody will see them kill them. I'm not going to sit in the car and somebody just shoot me. So I got out of the car immediately and tried to walk fast away from the car. And so there were two of them. So they drove close to where I was trying to walk away from the car. And then they slowed down, and the guy in the front seat, it was the driver, and the guy in the front seat showed his hair out and said, you scared? Massa Washington, you scared? And you're putting people's names in report? You're calling people to talk all kind of things about people? You scared? We'll kill you in a place. And he just zoomed and went off. They went to my house. They put a death threat on the gate one soon Sunday morning. We know where you and your family can be. We know where you hiding. We know where you go. If you put our name in a report, we're going to kill you. Every other commissioners were receiving threat. People will call me. We will send text. We send all that information to the international community. So Amnesty International. So we went through a lot. And then also perpetrators were openly coming on the radio, calling our names. Prince Johnson used to call our name every day for tea, breakfast, and dinner. They were all coming or calling our names. Ellen, when the TRC report came out, Ellen provided the City Hall for all us to meet and come out with a position statement against the TRC. The president of the Republic of Liberia did that.
Wow.
In this country, she would have been impeached. So force us to danger. Yeah, the president office, okay? The president office got the City Hall. At that time, Mrs. Ophelia Huff Setuma was the
mayor.
Yeah. Her husband, Mr. Morris Setuma, whose name is in the TRC report
I believe he was
the deputy minister for economics affairs.
Okay, I thought he was for state.
State. Yeah, deputy minister for state.
Yeah,
deputy minister for state. And then he was very close to Ellen. So Ellen told him, tell your wife they got to have the City Hall ready for, so all warlords, Lawrence Brown, Charles Taylor, former foreign minister Lawrence Brown was a spokesman. Every single major perpetrator was in our room. And I remember the headline Tom Kamara at the time was alive at the New Democrat newspaper. His headline he came out with the next day was TRC Unite Warlords, because they were all now, even though they were fighting each other, but they united
Yeah, because they know what was coming.
Yeah, they united against us. So they called the press conference, and in that press conference, Prince Johnson said, the war is not over yet. They're putting our name in report. Anything can happen to anybody. It prompted U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield at the time to go to the Capitol building, to Prince Johnson office, to ask him just to confirm that, yes, indeed, he made a statement. So even though they had a recording, but they wanted to hear from him, said, did you rather make this statement, Mr. Senator, against commissioners, because these people only did their job based upon what happened here. We just want to confirm the U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield went there. It's reported, it's in the archives. So she went there and asked Prince Johnson, did you really make this statement at your press conference yesterday, threatening commissioners? Then he said, oh, you know, I was taken out of context. But we had a recording. Recording our names, call my names, call other commissioners' names. So we went through a lot. But let me just say, you asked a question about whether the TRC report should be endorsed by the legislature.
Go to the legislature, approve, and then go to the Temple of Justice for persecution.
It's happened. The act is legal, and it says here, Article 10 on a reporting requirement, it says, the only thing the legislature should be doing, actually, is the legislature should be citing the president every quarter to give an update on the implementation
process.
The legislature got nothing to do with the actual recommendation of the TRC. They more or less should be serving as a monetary arm to ensure that the executive implements the TRC report. The legislature, the human rights, the National Human Rights Commission, and civil society organizations. So here it says, Article 10, Section 8, the head of state shall report to the national legislature within 3 months of receipt of the report of the TRC and on a quarterly basis thereafter as to the implementation of the commission's recommendations. All recommendations shall be implemented. Where the implementation of any recommendation has not been complied with, the legislature shall require the head of state to show cause for such non-compliance.
So stop right there, Massa. So here we go. You got Prince Johnson in the house. You got Yaga Koluba in the house. You got some of these guys who are all perpetrators. Serious perpetrators. Do you think they're really going to go after the president? And the president is the giant since 1979 to 2003, and now sitting as a president. This really doesn't make sense.
But
context of they're not truthful to the Liberian people. But one of our viewers here tonight is asking, is there a statute of limitation for the TRC recommendations? Because usually
no,
somebody also is open-ended.
Thank God they didn't put any statute of limitation here in the TRC Act. No, there's no statute of limitation.
So any president coming later on can go after these guys.
Yes, the only statute of limitation, the only indirect statute of limitation we have here in the TRC Act refers to the archives. It says those confidential documents, those documents that the TRC received, or for example, the confidential statement, those that were deemed confidential, be made public to the public after the TRC process until after 20 years. So that's basically the only one. And it also says that commissioners and any staff or anybody who work with the process cannot use any documentation or any direct information from the TRC process to profit from it, meaning to write your book and sell it and make money out of people's statement. We cannot do that. So those are, the kinds of regulations that we have. But when it comes to implementation of the report, there is no statute of limitation. And also, there is no statute of limitation on war crimes.
Okay.
There is no statute of limitation on war crimes.
Even though the recommendations were put forth in 2005, we're going 15 years, almost going to 16 now. And if those recommendations has held forth, then we have covered 15 or 16 years of Prince Johnson being out of the question. Yega Koluba, all these people,
Would
George
have cleaned up the place. They would have cleaned up public office.
been kicked to the side. Some of them will be in jail. But because Ellen failed to do that. So let's fast track, come to George Weah, who's supposed to be the man of change, who's supposed to be the guy who came to power with a blank slate. He was one of the people called the peace ambassador. He was recognized by the United Nations. He even helped to propagate for disarmament, and he, I believe, promised that he was going to get justice. Here we are, 300,000 people are dead. George Weah has been in power 3 years, and he's muted on the whole process, has never said anything. It doesn't seem as though they give a crap about it.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
Yeah, actually, it's really unfortunate and it's sad because George Weah, the George Weah that people know from yesteryears was someone to tell you, he was a humble guy, very kind, a decent guy. And I read his statement when he was children's ambassador for UNICEF, I think. He said people should be held accountable who destroy the lives of these children and turn them into child soldiers. They should be persecuted. And what irony, because Weah now is president of the Republic of Liberia. He has the TRC report. The TRC report is legal. It's not something that states commissioners sat down and say, oh, we're going to be the Robin Hood and we're going to clean up place. We're going to be the John Wayne of the Wild Wild West. And, we want to sweep, of the dirt of that country. No, this was put together by the entire country. Commissioners were vetted. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the TRC process. Okay. And millions, hundreds and millions of human resources, manpower,
time, countless hours.
Yes, into the TRC process. You would have thought. Honestly, I was excited. Honestly, I was excited when we and the rest of them got the presidency because of the youthfulness of the government in terms of the main leaders, and then also because of Weah's own background. He came from a loaded beginning. He worked very hard. He knows what it is to be
victimized.
He knows what it is to be victimized. He knows what it is not to have the basic things in life to enhance your self or actualization in humanity. Weah knows this, and so. Honestly, I really thought that the TRC reports and recommendations would have been on the CDC government agenda. Maybe it is. I have no proof. And Weah has said before that, in fact, the CDC campaign, all those years, when the CDC campaigned as an opposition, a campaign on the implementation of the TRC report. Moba Modu, Jefferson Koji, they went to jail, calling upon Ellen to implement the TRC report. They actually went to jail. Jefferson Koji was jailed for a couple of days because he was demonstrating with some youth for the implementation of the TRC report. They went at warlords held accountable. They went at Ellen, held accountable. They went at the TRC report implemented. So what's changed now?
Yeah.
What's different now?
Everybody getting rich. But Massa, do you go to bed and regret that it seemed as though, or have you ever shed tears for all those countless hours you talked about, gathering information, the documentation, the testimony? And I know some of those testimonies may have brought tears to your eyes, I'm sure. And do you get haunted by the experience and see this and say to yourself, wow, would this ever take foot in our country? Because from what I'm sensing here is that without the implementation of this document, these recommendations rather, Liberia stand not to ever be reconciled. So long these same people continue to parade, become powerful people in government at the detriment of the society, the downtrodden masses. These people are hungry, they're tired, they're fatigued, they're destitute, they're deprived. Look at the economy of the country right now. I mean, would there ever be reconciliation in the absence of this document recommendations?
No, reconciliation remains elusive.
Hmm.
It's going to remain elusive because the recommendations of the TRC touch on every facet of the society. We have recommendations just about for everything. We have recommendation for memorialization. We have recommendation for even land dispute. We have recommendation for reparation. We have recommendation for youth, how to, handle the youth, for women, for children. Just about all, aspect of the society. Because we also, the way we wrote the TRC report was, we intended it to also be a working document to help the government government design programs and strategy to for addressing the different ills in in the society, the different aspects of the society. So we actually thought that the government, alien government, and also the WIA government, we actually take the TRC documentation and look into it and see, you know what, we can implement this for the country and our government can look good. You getting my point?
So you think there are recommendations right now that can help shape we as government with what's happening right now, trending in the country?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We have all sort of blockbuster recommendations for accountability, recommendation for economic growth and stimulus, recommendations for the security sector. We have recommendation for education, recommendation for dealing with the less fortunate in society. We even have recommendation for the media. We have recommendation for the growth, sustainability, and viability of the media. Let me just show you something. This is
just before you show that quickly, I want to tell our callers tonight. You can call 404-272-2808, 404-272-2808. We will try to see if we can get you in to speak with our commissioner, or if you wanted to make comment, 404-272-2808. Ashford Garley live here on Bridge Radio Africa. We're coming your way via YouTube and Facebook. Massa Washington, a Liberian journalist, a woman or women and human rights activist, and a former commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And the reason why I say former, because the commission is no more.
Of course.
Okay, so coming, Massa.
Oh, okay. So I can show these. So the TRC report is not in just one book. The TRC report is about like 8 different categories. So we have the main volume report, which is more than 470 pages. This is a main volume report. Okay, so this is a summary report of basically the TRC process summary. Then we have specialized reports. Okay. We have the diaspora report. The Liberian TRC was the first TRC in the whole world to engage its citizens in the diaspora. The Liberian TRC has set the bar very high and has started a new course for how TRC should engage the people living outside of the country. Right now, as we speak, every other TRC that has been formed after the Liberian TRC, they come back to the TRC model for engaging the diaspora, and they use it. So the diaspora project was a groundbreaking project for transitional justice process all over the world. This is the diaspora report.
Okay. So I see you have a lot. We think we're in the same region. I will hope to get some documents from you to help me, because this topic, honestly, Massa, is very dear to my heart. I grew up in a greater portion of the war days of Liberia from 1979 up to 2003. I seen firsthand. I saw people massacred, meaning in the context of just being shot in the street. Um, and every time I think about it, it hurts because we could have healed
Yeah.
if these recommendations were put in place. And not to say that it's going to solve all the problem, but it's the first step
Yeah.
in showing something is being done. And not only that something is being done, but those people are remembered. Because
It's a
for instance,
blueprint.
the next question I had for you is all of the information that you guys gathered. Uh, did you archive some of those names that were called, meaning the victims who died, um, to come up with a count?
We,
Meaning to
it,
say, okay, based on our information we've received over the 5-year period, we have at least 200,000 people accounted for, or 100,000 people have accounted for, and that can be put in the report so that tomorrow, if we want to memorialize them and create a shrine, those people names can go. Um,
yeah, we have a listing
Good.
all the deaths, and the way this listing was generated is that during the statement taking process, when the statement takers went out into the community to talk to the people and get statement. For example, if someone come and say, "Oh, my family was killed," we gave them, you know, a list, and you ask them for the name of every single person who was killed in that family and in that household. And then we also spoke to community leaders to also give us the names of every person in the community who they know were killed and stuff. And so over time, all those names were gathered and stuff, and the TRC has all those names. Now, you talk about archiving, the TRC process has not been archived. Right now, as we speak, all of those volumes of the TRC work are in boxes at the Georgia Tech University. They're being stored there for safekeeping until Liberia is ready to actually properly create a monument, a museum
Yeah.
for the TRC process and properly archive the TRC process. Is because our offices were set on fire one time when we were still working.
Wow.
People were trying to
Destroy evidence.
yes, destroy evidence. And the room that the fire was set on was the data room where all the data was being input, where all the statistical analysis were being made. So based upon our experience, we said no. If we turn, because after the TRC process, we call the GAC in to come, we turn over all our access to the GAC. Our commission and the commission of John Modu, General Auditing Commission, were the only two governmental commissions. After our work, we called GSA and we told them to please come and take all the access. We gave them all the decks, carpets from the floor, curtains, computers, we turned all to GSA. No other group did it. Okay, so, but we knew that based upon what was happening, the president and the government were no more supporting the TRC. In fact, they were trying to destroy the process because their names were in the report. Perpetrators were chasing us all over the place. They were setting fire to the premises of the TRC. So based upon that, we went into a memorandum of understanding with the Georgia Tech University in Atlanta, Georgia, to host all documentations of the TRC until Liberia is at that place where it is stable, where people will stop acting crazy to keep destroying everything. This is why we don't have any proper written history, because we don't have any libraries. People destroy everything during the war, during the coup. They destroy, law reviews were all over the place. So Georgia Tech University is keeping all of the TRC work. When the country gets stable, when Liberians are really serious about documentation, about archiving, and about their history, when they're really serious about educating the people about what happened, they will create a museum for the TRC. And at that time, all of us as a country can work out a modality to go back to Georgia Tech and ask them to please turn over our archives to us, but then get some international group to help us create a museum and properly archive all of that work. But for right now, all of the important documents of the TRC, we ship it at the end of our process. Before we left those offices, we ship them out of Liberia. It's sitting here in the United States. on the campus of the Georgia Tech University. If we hadn't done that, all those documents would have been burned.
It would have been in vain. You worked for nothing.
Yeah.
But let's understand something here quick. I'm not sure if you have your monitor a little loud in the background because I'm getting feedback. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. All right.
Noise.
So I have a question here from one of our viewers. Is there any recommendation in the overall recommendation for political parties that have enormous resources, plenty of wealth, to be able to implement any of those recommendations, but do not look at it as politicizing the process? Did you guys talk about anything that political, meaning it could be an opposition party, it could be a new party that want to take on, and I think you said something about you guys in the recommendation talked about streamlining political parties because the
Yes.
proliferation of political parties will only muddy the water. Let's
Yes.
touch on that.
Yes.
But is there anywhere in the recommendation that talks about any political party that has enormous resources to help with the implementation process? And I see it as politicizing the process.
No, we didn't specifically pinpoint any group of the society to say, well, you know what, you can implement the report or you can implement an aspect of the report. But the implementation of the report is left with the people of Liberia,
Okay.
spearheaded by the government. The National Human Rights Commission and civil society organizations should be working along with the government, asking them, questions and lobbying the government so that the government can start the implementation of the recommendations. And the implementation of the recommendations is the business of all Liberians. So we didn't say, you know what, political parties, you can implement this, women's group, you can implement this, youth group, you can implement this. No, if we had done it that way, it would have been, we went out a process that would have been easy for Liberians to
more organized.
This is why, like one of our international friends, like some TRCs, their recommendations, they attach timeline to the recommendations as to when they should be implemented. But we did not do that. We left that open because you see how things go now. If we had attached timelines to implementation of the recommendations, then guess what? Probably by now, all those recommendations would have been certified null and void because the timeline would have elapsed. So we left it open because, one, we didn't want to tie the government hands, and we wanted the Liberian people to be free. We wanted to create a flexible situation and atmosphere where the recommendations can be implemented based upon available resources and also based upon expediency.
So talk about the proliferation of political parties and what the recommendation talked about, not allowing too many political parties, rather than people merging to form bigger political institutions and not splinterize the process.
Yeah, the TRC actually recommended, again, the recommendations are all in here. The TRC actually recommended that Liberians begin to work towards scaling down the proliferation of political parties, because people may think, say, well, you know what, it's good for democracy, but then again, how much does it take away from making democracy effective and workable for Liberia? It's taking a lot away. So the TRC, I think, has recommended 3 political parties. They didn't call name, it just said political parties and politicians should work together to at least have only 3 parties. So that way people have a choice. You don't only have either IE or Barrow, but you also got St. Joseph Warriors, so you don't only have only 2 mainstream parties, but then you can have a third party. So, because the last election, I think Liberia, they had, 34 political parties or whatsoever. It's ridiculous.
Yes, for a small country.
For a small country, ridiculous. And then I think the TRC, I think we also recommend that political parties should not be seen as oppositional government should actually embrace political parties. They should actually help them, establish and be viable, because the country is run by politics and politicians, and you want to make sure that you eliminate any bottlenecks that will impede the viability and the the efficiency and also the credibility.
So I listen. This topic is very salient, and is bringing to light a lot of things that I'm sure that many of our listeners and viewers probably did not know. Except we heard that the TRC recommendation came out. We're still waiting for implementation. Here we're going 15 years. We have a new government, a government that should have been very neutral to begin the process, but this government is also in the bed with some of these serious warlords, because a guy like Prince Beasley is a kingmaker. He influences, the presidency. So yes, he has a place in in the society as it stands now, except where a government that is serious about bringing perpetrators to book. I've seen a lot of different interviews of Prince, and he brags that nothing going to come out of anything, and it's probably becoming a fulfilling prophecy. Um, we asked the question earlier whether there's a timeline, and you said no, there's no timeline for or statute of limitation. But in your heart, do you think that there's a day coming when a government that will come to power will ever implement those recommendations? Even them.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Massa.
Well, based upon experience, you learn from from your experiences. So based upon experience, I'm hopeful, but I'm hopeful cautiously. We don't exhibit youthful exuberance anymore because of what the practical experience has been. If the TRC recommendations could not be implemented under Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, if the TRC recommendations is struggling to be implemented under President George Weah, then we can be hopeful, but we can be hopeful only cautiously. You get to my point? We hope that it will get implemented. However, because it is good for the country, it will greatly enhance the peace and reconciliation, and let Liberians not fool themselves. There will be no genuine peace and reconciliation without addressing these things that brought people to their knees, that brought us to this point. You cannot wipe out entire families, and the perpetrators live in the same community with these people. They're not repentant, they're not contrite, they beat their chest, and unfortunately, they are the new landlords. They are the ones who got all the political power, they got all the stolen wealth, so they call the shots, while the victims continue to wallow in abject poverty and are re-victimized all over again. But then also, all of us as Liberians have a responsibility to insist that enough is enough, and to insist that we usher in a new day for Liberia, so that if not us, but at least our children can have a fair chance to know actually what a decent society should look like. The Liberian people themselves should begin to challenge that yoke, of fear that holds them down, that yoke of inequality, that yoke of iniquity that keeps them under. I mean, the thing is, people are voting for Prince Johnson every election.
And the guy getting numbers.
People vote for.
He carries himself as the savior of Nima County.
Yeah. People are voting all the time for people who they know, because these people were in a community with these people. They saw them do things. They would see me, a TRC commissioner, a journalist, and say, oh, and says, Massa, we're really depending on your try for us. But guess what? We have tried. You need to try too. Point, we have tried. We are still trying. But after a while, it looks like we are the only ones, We can't be the judge, jury, and executioner at the same time. We need your help. Like you made a very important point when you said the the over majority of the voting population now are those boys who were all child soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the people that get voted into office. They're not like you and me. I tell people straight, I don't joke about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeke Koruba is the representative for my district. I grew up on the old road, Capra Estate, behind Capra Estate. I went to school there, and my family is there. That's my turf. But I can jokingly, I tell people all the time, you know what? When I come home, I'm not even going to fool myself to say I'm taking Yeke home because he's going to whip me flat. Because that's the reality of what we
That's his base, yeah. That
that's
group.
that group. You know, they don't see people like you and me as part of them. They don't see people like you and me, or as those people who can help turn things around for us. Those are the people, they grew up with the perpetrator godfathers. After killing their parents, they made them feel like, oh, you know what? You're my son. I'm gonna take care of you. Some of them were nice to them after they killed their parents, and then they became
Surrogate parents.
surrogate parents to
Mm-hmm.
so there's something in psychology called the attachment theory. So people become attached to the victimizers, and the victimizers are all they know. They are the parents, and then they grow that attachment, and then they grow some semblance of love for them. This is what is happening in Liberia today. Those are all the people who are voting for these people consistently, continuously. We have decent people. Common example, they just ended senatorial by-election. I pay attention to Bomi County. In fact, I was supporting a candidate in Bomi County because I'm from Bomi County. I wasn't born there, but my parents, my family is from there. My family is one of the historic, strong families of Bomi County. And when my father was alive, he went to Bomi County every weekend, Clay, just 45 minutes away because that's my grandfather's town. And we had Sandro Johnson, who is a known perpetrator in Bomi County. He was one of the generals for Charles Taylor NPF in Bomi County. He put fire to the C.H. Dewey School, the company school that is built like schools in America. He put fire to the school when he was a student because he as a student had problem with the school. He put fire to the school. He's been named in a lot of atrocities in Bomi County. But Sandro Johnson had been senator for Bomi County for the longest.
Mm-hmm.
Edwin Snow just unseated him. Alex Tyler was Charles Taylor Master General for the rebels, the NPF rebels in Bomi County. He was in charge of paying the boys when they go on the battlefront whatsoever. Alex Tyler was voted as a representative for Bomi County, actually from my own district, from Clare District, from my grandfather's village. And he later on became speaker. Okay? Edwin Snow, we know he's Charles Taylor, former son-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
So LPRC. There was a huge report that came out on economic crimes at LPRC. His name was in the report. He was indicted. He was taken to court. We have a copy of that report. Edwin Snow is in the TRC economic crimes listing.
Mm-hmm.
Snow is today considered the godfather of Bomi County.
Yeah.
He was a representative, and he decided to abandon his representative seat and run for the Senate. And guess what?
He wins.
But in the meantime, they had other candidates. For example, they had Dr. Zobon Norman, who is an educator. He's a former journalist. He's an educator, very cool guy. He was the first president of the Bomi County Community College. They didn't vote for him. His own people, he was born in Clay, Bomi County. They didn't vote for him. They had other candidates also who were clean. They didn't vote for them because you know what? They did not have stolen money to give people $10, to give people $5, to give people $20 to go and vote. So even our own people, our ordinary people, they also got work to do. They also bear some of the responsibility for what's happening to them. So when you have alternative like Dr. Norman and stuff, okay, who is credible, who is an educator, has a PhD education, okay, you don't vote for him, but you vote for Edwin Snow, then you vote for Sandro Johnson, then you vote for Alex Tyler, then.
And I guess it's the syndrome the book people has failed us. That's the syndrome to go with. But then if the people who in power don't know book, how do they attract investment in the country? How do they reach out into the community, the international community? Will the international community even look at them in the faces? So we're in a dilemma. But Massa, you've done extremely well tonight. I told you we'll be here for an hour and a half. We've covered a lot of important pieces here tonight. I'm sure that our viewers and listeners have gained a lot of insight with the TRC process. It couldn't have come from anyone better than you being a commissioner on that body. We want to thank you so much for coming in. Give me your closing statement and we'll wrap this thing up.
Thank you very much. Sometimes I marvel at the complexity that is the Liberian man. We are a complex people. We're probably the most complex people under the face of this, under the sun. It's like, what do we want? We want this. We don't want this. We want to develop our country, but then we don't do the things that will bring development to our country. Okay? You want a just society, but then you don't do the things that will create and help you create a just society. You don't want perpetrators in public office. Oh, you accuse other people of economic crimes, they're stealing your money all the time. But then when you have the opportunity, they are the ones that you vote into public office. And guess what? You honor them on Sunday as Father of the Year, Mother of the Year, and all the kind of stuff. You getting my point?
Yeah.
Liberians at a point in time, we really have to sit down and deconstruct our behavior and those things that are important to us. What do we want? I see Liberians, even here in the United States right now, with all this political thing going on with the US election, with President Donald Trump and whatsoever, go on Facebook. Liberians live on Facebook now. They're just talking about the people business, in this election thing and stuff. But guess what? You don't see that kind of favor when it comes to pushing for what, they think is right for that country. You don't see them talking about the implementation of the TRC report. You don't see them actually pushing for why things should be better. And until those of us who consider ourselves, I will not say the good people, because all of us have our skeletons. Just because people don't know them doesn't make us better than other people. But at least those of us who don't have the kind of sins that some of our public officials have, we need to stop being divided and work together in one accord so we can achieve a better agenda for Liberia. We need to set the tone for our people to follow. Common example, look what happened with the CPP, with all the different groups, the communist group, all the other group and stuff like that. It's just Liberians need to be serious. I don't see us as a serious people for Kano, and I don't mean to put us down.
No, you're right. I said the other night here, we are ordinary people. We need to become extraordinary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So until we can really decide as a people that we want to be serious about our country, about our destiny, about the future of our children, what kind of country, what kind of society we live for our children, until we really decide to put our act together, we will continue to be like this. We will continue to be like this. And unfortunately, some of us who are so passionate about seeing real change come to Liberia, unfortunately, maybe we may not even be around to even see,
if anything good going to come out.
Anything good coming out of Liberia. It's sad, but we will try. We will try our best. We'll continue to try. We'll continue to do our best until that time where we can't anymore. But Liberians need to be serious about Liberia. You cannot want the country to be united when you do not want to implement the TRC recommendations, because all of us, we are one. Liberia is a small country. Because Liberia is a small country, so much the better. That's why you should insist that the right thing be done. And in this case, if doing the right thing means that you must hold people responsible and accountable for hurting their brothers, for destroying other people's property that they work hard for all their lives, then guess what? So be it. Until we can hold people accountable, hold ourselves accountable, we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. And Liberians are our own problems. And we must solve our problems. We must stop sitting down and waiting for manna from heaven, because Jesus Christ is not coming down, and taking up no bow and arrow and start fighting any war and stuff for us. The international community can only help us to do those things that we want and we are ready to do for ourselves collectively as a nation. Every day we call We cry, oh, the international community, oh, the international community. Well, who's casting a vote? How many white people you stood online the other day to go vote for senators and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
A point?
Yep.
Liberians, we need to be serious. We're not serious people, unfortunately. We need to be serious.
Thank you so much, Massa. Thank you. It was good seeing you again. I haven't seen you in a long time.
I know.
And thank you so much. But this topic does not stop here. We still got more to talk. The next time we talk, we'll be looking at the recommendations within the report. Because a lot of people don't know what those 47 recommendations are. So when we capturing some of those recommendations and see, as you said, it will help, the current government or any government to come, because the whole idea was for it to make a transformation for the society, not just in one sector of reconciliation, but also for education, for healthcare, for the economy, for agriculture, for investment, all these things they're in the recommendation. And for people to sit on it and then they're struggling to find their way out, leading a small country of 5 million, and here we have no money in the bank. The economy is in shambles. It's dark. It's a whole different topic. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate the time. You got your Friday night. Go enjoy it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you guys just joining us, we about wrapping up now. I want to say thank you to all of you who were out there with us. It was a very beautiful topic, and I think that hopefully those who are supposed to help bring the change to Liberia from the powers that be regarding the implementation process of these recommendations will do their best to take this very seriously. This is Bridge Radio Africa. We've broadcasted this program both on Facebook and YouTube. So if you didn't catch it in its entirety, you can always go back and check the program out. We want to thank all of you. I may not be able to borrow the wise man's word because Ashford is not here tonight. I'm not the brother who eats iron is stronger than a lion. I am not the microphone commander, but I am the volcano eruptible Shelton here tonight, filling in. So we'll be back here Monday 8 p.m. Ashford will be in studios with me. As I said, we excuse him tonight because he had some very pertinent things to take care of in the name of Bridge Radio Africa. Thank you all for being with us. We enjoyed, and I will see you on Monday. We will see you on Monday at 8 p.m. with another brand new edition of the Ashford Garvey live show here on Bridge Radio Africa. Thank you.